Hello, welcome everybody. Welcome to this webinar for the Transforming Organisations Hub. As you know, my name's Terry. I'm going to be your host for today. And with us is Daniela Papi-Thornton, who's going to be exploring with us today systems-led leadership. So very much looking forward to that. Okay. Um, Before we start, I just want to share something with you, and that's a book that I'm currently reading, and it's by William Morris. It's the collective writings of William Morris, and as you may know, William Morris was the founder of the arts and crafts movement, and I'm reading a story that he's written, and he wrote it in 1890, and it's about a future civilization. And for him, the future is the 1950s. So he's describing this future civilization that is for him was to exist in 1950. So when you read the book, it's a bit of a play with your head in terms of the timings. But in the story, he talks about how everybody refers to each other as neighbour. So even when they meet each other as strangers, they say, hello, neighbour. And kind of love that because it says to us all that we're all living in community. We're all neighbours, a global community, and we're all neighbours. So I kind of love that. And then I thought, well, actually, nowadays when we meet, we're quite often meeting like this with a screen. And literally, we are next to each other. In the virtual world, we're living next to each other. So we're all neighbours. So welcome, everybody. Welcome, neighbours, to this session today at the Transforming Organisations Hub. As I say, we're honoured today to have Daniela Papi-Thornton with us, who's going to be talking a little bit about systems-led leadership. I'll just introduce Daniela a little bit, and I think, Daniela, you're going to say a few more words to introduce yourself as well. So Daniela's work bridges systems education, leadership, and personal development work. She typically works with universities, foundations, non-profits, and corporations as they explore the possibilities of contributing to shifting patterns towards more equitable results. She is a lecturer at the University of Colorado in Boulder, and has also served on the teaching team at a variety of global institutions, including the University of Oxford Said Business School and the Yale School of Management. So welcome, Daniela, and over to you.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you, everyone at ALIP for having me here today. Delighted to be here. And Sophie McLaren, who's on here too, who was a speaker with you all recently, who connected me. So I'm delighted to be here. Before I show my slides, and before we kind of get into that, I wanted to just drop in for a second together, but I wanted to introduce a little model that we're going to look at. And some of you who have already done a lot of work with systems might already know it, but there's a model called the Berkana 2 loops. It probably will look better for you this way. Let's see, this way, where it's basically saying that when one system is ending, another system is being born. We don't take an old system and slowly transform it into a new system, right? We didn't have horses and then they became half horse, half car, and then they became 3/4 car and a quarter horse, and then they became car, right? Like we have an old system, and as the old system is descending, ending, hospicing, being destroyed, whatever is happening in that old system, the new system or systems are being born and then being solidified. And as you know, just kind of even knowing that systems tool helps me, at least in times like these, right? To know that we can focus here. And it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with looking at when things are dying and ending. But at the same time, we can focus here of like, what do we want to be birthing, right? And we might notice that in ourselves. Where is my attention? Where is my energy? Where is my organization focused, right? And we need organizations and individuals along this whole pathway, right? We need the individuals that are helping to hospice the old, transition the material from the old into a new system eventually. And then we need the people who are birthing the new. So I just wanted to take us for a minute. You are open to closing your eyes. Um, and we've probably, I know here where I am in Boulder, Colorado, a lot of people have spent time in that top part thinking about, oh, what is going down? What is being destroyed? What is ending? And I just want to take us for a minute into like the birthing of the new and maybe visualizing what that means for you and what a beautiful new future, new system, new systems might look like. And as Terry said, hello, neighbor, right? What if that is a norm of a new system, which is actually a norm of many old systems, right? That we would call each other brother, son, cousin, right? We had an awareness in the past of that interconnection, awareness of that shared consciousness, shared connection, and we used words that showed that we knew we were related, we knew we were connected. So as you're visualizing this future, I just want to drop in there that there are so many little conversations happening about what this future is. So let's kind of just tune in, pretend our ears are like a radio, and we're going to tune in to a few of those conversations, right? So we're going to tune in for a moment on this future thread of this possibility of a conscious leadership world, a world where everyone recognizes that our brains are more than the materiality of our brains, our hearts are more than the materiality of our hearts, that we can connect in ways that are beyond our physical bodies, and that connection is sacred. And we're going to tune into a world and look around that world, and what would that be like? What would that be like if we remembered ourselves with that old consciousness that can be a new consciousness in this modern world. And it invades and embeds itself in every business and every political structure and every meeting we have and every family and every individual, and weaves itself like the mycelia connecting us, that it is in a way that is a mental model that's shared by all once again. And we're going to tune our ears to a different frequency now, a frequency that is definitely rumbling in that new system world that's being born. And that frequency is in this world of the divine feminine, and people talking about what is a world like when we remember the feminine principle, when we recognize that it has been removed and that actually it is our connection to the sacred, it is our connection to nature. And that when we bring it in, when we find that yin and yang balance, when we find that divine masculine, divine feminine balance within ourselves and within our collectives, we will no longer need to worry about dominance, destruction, war, us versus them, I win, you lose. As a teacher of mine, Tuesday Rivera, says, relationship as resolution, right? We're no longer trying to dominate. We're actually valuing that relationship, that spaciousness, that interconnection in how we operate once again in our businesses, our lives, our families. And we can see that weaving through the mycelia of all of us in the future. And we can tune our ears in to so many other conversations. Let's tune in for a second to the regenerative conversations, to those people who are using nature as medicine, nature as teacher, who recognize, like another teacher of mine, Miranda Pradial, would say, she says, we make up these stories about the past and say that they're myths, that the indigenous people of North America learned about the OSHA root and its healing powers from the bear, but they did, right? These are not a myth, she'll remind us, right? So it's another listening that we have here is about the rematriation movement, female indigenous-led movement to reconnect us to our indigeneity, and the fact that we all have a right. We all have ancestors who knew how to connect to the land and to each other in an honoring, sacred, interconnected way, who could listen to nature, to the other beings, to all, and hear, right? That is not, we have not evolved, as she would also put it, we have de-evolved, right? So what does it look like when that nature connection, that indigeneity connection is rewoven through the fabrics of our families, our individuals, our collectives, our world, our work, our politics? And I want you to just feel the interconnected threads of these conversations that are bubbling up, and they're happening, and they're reminding us they are ancestral. They are a modern reconnection to the way that we used to know how to connect to ourselves, each other, and the planet. And they are calling, and they are saying, it's time. It's time to remember. It's time to reweave the systems that you have created, humanity, so that they are in alignment with these interconnected, natural, historical, and now to be soon modern ways of being in the world. May it be so. So you're welcome to come back when you're ready. And that is part of what we're going to be talking about today, is this call to systems, which is what I would call it. Others might, that they're all these parts, they're all interwoven. A call to rematriation, a call to consciousness, a call to regenerative principles, a call to nature. And what does it look like to remember? And we all come at this. There's different volumes that those calls are calling to each of us, right? We don't need to hear them all, right? We don't need to follow every one of those paths down. But as a collective, that once we can interweave these, I think we will be really well on our way to this new energy that we're creating. And so I know a lot of what Aleph Trust, transpersonal psychology, is calling in is this like spiritual, mystical, transcendent reconnection to ourselves, our consciousness, right? And like I said, in that kind of visioning, it's a modern return to ancestral ways of connecting to ourselves, each other, and the planet. And this is you're the first people seeing this. This is like a 1.0. This is of a visual that I put together about this, of just saying, like, what are these different callings, right? There's people being called, different spiritual lineages, they're being called to listen to plants as teachers, consciousness. There's this scientific re-exploration of understanding of how the quantum connects into this regenerative movement, the divine feminine, rematriation. And to me, so much of this is a call to systems, right? That's the lens I see it through, right? Others might call it a call to consciousness. And so we're going to spend most of the second half of our time together today digging into this and thinking about this. But first, I just want to introduce a little bit about my own path into thinking about systems and these topics. And we're going to talk a little bit about tools, specific tools. That's actually the image of the Bracana two loops that I was showing before. So we'll look at a little bit of those today. We'll talk about why now. And finally, we'll end with the lessons of the interstitial, which is a new body part if you have not read about it yet. Okay, so we'll jump into the Rosetto study. Does anyone know what the Rosetto study was, 1955 to 1961? No, okay. If you read Outliers, it's actually the introduction story at the very beginning of Outliers. And they talk about the town of Rosetto, Pennsylvania, where the mostly moved from to this mining town in Pennsylvania. And in the 1950s, doctors in the area realized that the people in the town of Rosetto were not dying of heart attacks. No one under the age of 45 had died of a heart attack. People older than that had less than half of the rate of the neighboring towns. And actually, as they started to peel back, they realized other health indicators were showing the same thing. These people were super healthy. They weren't dying of the same things that all the neighboring towns people were dying from. And so, pre-cell phone, pre-computer, they walked into the town, they sat down at people's dinner tables, and if you took a scoop of pasta, I took a scoop of pasta, and I took it back to, track it. And so they had these theories, right? That, okay, what is creating these outlier health, must be their diet, or it's their genes, or it's their fitness, and we got to figure this out, right? And so one by one, they crossed these out. It wasn't their diet. They weren't eating that much better than their neighbors, right? It wasn't their fitness. They were sometimes less fit, right? And it wasn't their genes. They followed the cousins and the other people, the other relatives who'd moved to different towns, and those people were still dying of heart attacks, just like everyone else. Okay, so what was going on, right? So they're doing this study. And eventually they published a study, and it took them a while to get published because people were like, we don't know about this. And they said, it's actually the health of the community, right? The health of the system. Men were multiple times more likely to be in different fraternal societies. People were living in 3-generation homes. If anyone had a lot of wealth, they didn't flaunt it. If they instead used it to support others. If someone was in need, they didn't even need to ask. It came to them, right? So, I drew this as a linear line, support from your community to outlier health outcomes. It probably look like support from your community leads to lower stress, which in turn leads to healthier outlier health outcomes. So why do I care about this? So Rosetto, Pennsylvania was where my grandfather was born. His name was Tony, but they called him Jack because there was like 25 Tonys. So Jack was the last son in a family of 10. And when his 2 older brothers just above him were getting pulled out of middle school to go work in the quarry, the teacher came and said, your kids are smart. Let them stay in. Let them stay in school. And the 2 brothers said, Dad, we'll go out. We'll go work in the quarry, but you got to let Jack go on in school. So Jack finished middle school. Jack went to high school. All the older brothers who were working at the quarry saved money. They sent Jack to Lehigh, the college down the road. He went to Lehigh. He went to New York City. He became an engineer. He worked in engineering. And every weekend he would drive home to Rosetto, Pennsylvania, and with my mother and my uncle in the car, and visit his mother and bring cash and support different people in the family. And one story says that when one of those 2 brothers who had helped him lost his job and was about to lose his house, Jack came and paid it off so that he could keep it. So, these were my great aunts, and I don't know the right terminology, but who people were sitting at their dinner table tracking their lives, right? And my grandfather was the one who moved out. And he was the only one who died of a heart attack super young. And so I never met him, right? By 1985, the death rates were the same in Roseto, Pennsylvania, as the neighboring towns, right? This outlier effect had gone away. The 3 generations in one home, right? It's all of these, there's a tricky thing here, right? It's like the diversity came in, and we want to learn how to live in healthy systems with that diversity, right? But they weren't able to keep that. Their people moved out, the stress indicators went back up, and the death rates went back up. And so the learning for me has been the health of our systems really are about life and death. The health of our systems are indicators of our individual health and our collective health. And we value these linear indicators, right? We go to the doctor and they still say, tell me, has anyone in your family died of a heart attack? They don't ask, tell me, how healthy is your system? How healthy is your community? How interconnected do you feel? How supported do you feel, right? I mean, some people are asking that. Probably you all are asking that, right? But it's unlikely, not always, that when we go to, look at our own heart, our physical heart, right, that we get asked these questions. And I was just home in New York. My mother had hip surgery last week. And she takes some medicine for her blood pressure, and she said, well, this blood pressure is keeping me alive, gonna live longer than my parents. And it might be. It's not yes, and it's not that our genes don't have indicators, right? But it's also these other things that we have stopped talking about, forgotten, even when we have research that proves that the health of our systems are, at least in the case of Roseto, a higher indicator of our physical health than our genes. So I'm gonna do these little 4 segments, but just kind of pause in between for a moment of asking what this brings up for you. For anyone wants to unmute and share or type anything in the chat, feel free to do so. No pressure. But maybe, oh, thank you, Henry, go for it.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you could put a little more volume up, or maybe that's just me. I'll put my volume up. Go for it, Henry.
Yeah, let's go for this one.
I think we're good. We hear you if you just talk into the mic.
I've got a 3-year-old next door, so I can't be too loud. But yeah, I've been thinking a lot about food and the sort of health of whole foods and the importance of that on an individual system. And I guess your story just brought up, it's just kind of brought another dimension to it as well, because I'm thinking about my mother-in-law, and she struggles with fibromyalgia, and it just seems to be like a cascading of different ailments that she goes through, where she goes to the doctor and it's this linear thing of, oh, I'll do this, and then she ends up with this ailment and this one and this one. And yeah, I guess it's just a really active line of inquiry for me at the moment about what health is. And yeah, I just found it really interesting, you bringing that angle in. So that was what came up for me.
Thank you, Henry. Right. When we try and use linear solutions in complex challenges, right? It's like, oh, my pesticide's not working. More pesticide.
Yeah.
Oh, that's not working.
Yeah.
It just means we don't have enough pesticide, right? These are like when we're trying to use these linear methods in this complexity and not looking beyond. So yeah, thank you. Jessica.
Yes, really resonating with this. We have in Aleph Trust applied programs which work in health settings. And for years, I've observed this, that, we're in a community, we're working in areas with high social deprivation. We're bringing in more arts-based and mindfulness practices to alleviate mental ill health, but there are underlying factors. We're perceiving what's going on in the families of people, in the local community, how deprived the area is, of course, and that has a whole massive impact on people's outlook on life and how they, not just how they feed themselves, but how they also engage with each other, and how the local architecture even informs how people interact or don't interact with one another, right? People being very isolated and cut off, and not having access to nature. So it really hugely resonates, Daniela. I feel like this is the big piece that isn't perceived in all these sort of linear approaches
Yeah.
that are out there and are trying to fix symptoms on the surface of things. So thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Right. If we're only listening, right. I'm thinking about the woman who founded Instituto Dara, which is now in Brazil, but now in many countries. She talks about the story of how, as a doctor, she's like, you have these kids, they come in, they need antibiotics, they have a cough, whatever, and they're coming in again, and they're coming in again, and they're coming in again, right? But we're only listening in one way. In the hospital, we're listening for, when did the cough start? You know, how does it sound? What's happening with the medicine, right? And then she's rented the building across the street, and she would tell those families, she'd say, go across the street, right? And she'd have social workers there. And the social workers were listening way more widely and deeply, right? And they didn't come in with their checklist, that they would just listen, right? What's going on, right? And for some people, it's, we don't have the right paperwork, so we can't get a job. So we're living in a place that is not so healthy. Oh, and there's a hole in my son's roof, right? And it's raining in there, right? So the antibiotics aren't going to fix the hole, right? And so they would then connect people out to things like Habitat for Humanity, or whatever their version of that would be, an organization that's helping, okay, come fix the hole and come back, right? And then, okay, I want to come talk to these people here who help with legal paperwork, right? So that you can get the right to work here, so that your child can then be registered at school, whatever, you know. And the antibiotics are a part of this, right? But they're not going to do it on their own. And part of that problem is we have this specialization and linearity. And we think if one person does this part, and one person does this part, and one person does this part, and one person does this part, we've got it all covered, right? But actually, we need those weavers. We need those system thinkers, those people listening widely, who don't have a set agenda of saying this and that follows this, right? We're actually listening to the system, and great, I can connect you out, but I don't have one hammer in my toolkit, right? My toolkit is the thread of weaving you into a whole bunch of others' toolkits, right? Okay. And so we're gonna look at some frameworks, some of which might be more linear than others, and some, but they're all, the reality is that when you try and take complexity and turn it into a framework, it becomes linear in some way, right? It's like, sometimes my students will listen to like a whole bunch and they'll say, but Daniela, which framework is the most important? They're like, oh, I clearly did not do my job here, right? Because it's whatever feels right for you in exploring your system at that time, right? And so these are some different ways of taking complexity and trying to look at it in a visual way. So this is a 6 conditions framework. It's from a report from FSG called The Water of Systems Change. In some ways, it's related to, I'm going to jump ahead, a really famous systems educator, author, speaker was Daniela Meadows. And she had these 12 different leverage points in a system that she would explore in her work. And this is, in some ways, this is a kind of distillation of that. There's overlaps. But what essentially this is saying, and this is looking at our current modern systems by saying, okay, we've got oftentimes when we talk about system change, we're talking about policy change, right? And as we can all see, and we've all known, you can flip a policy. And then if the mental models haven't fully changed, probably when the next group comes into power, they might flip the policy and they might flip the policy. But even just changing a policy, it's a hard thing to do, right? And it does shift the conditions of a system, right? But there's deeper things underneath it. So in this top level structural change, policies, practices, resource flows, who has access to money, all those things, who has access to any of these resources. Underneath that is the power dynamics, right? It's one thing to change who has access to money. It's another thing to change who makes the decisions about who has access to money, right? It's another thing to reweave the relationships and connections, right? In that, look at Instituto Dara, we have the hospital, we have the organization that's doing the legal aid, we have the organization that is doing the roof fixing, right? But actually, when you, maybe if those people start meeting once a month and they're sharing information and connecting, that reweaving of relationships and connection, right? That really changes the system. And at the bottom, we have mental models, which obviously is an area that you all work in and understand really deeply, right? And so as we look, at these mental models, that will be a theme through a lot of this, right? Is that the stories we tell ourselves, the stories we tell each other, the things that we believe about our system, right? Like this study in 1955 proved that it's not just our genes, but yet our view that it is our genes, because that's what we're being told by the systems around us, is still so strong that in 2025, we're not asked about the health of our systems, we're asked about our genes still, right? Because our mental models are so darn strong, right? Like when we believe life is happening to us, not for us, we only see the things happening to us, right? And as you know, as part of Aleph Trust, you of course would get that, right? And the same thing is true if, like, we believe a school functions like this and it operates Monday through Friday and it has to have a building and da-da-da. Those are our belief systems around what school is, that just in the same way that our mental models around our lives dictate how the things we see, those things dictate what we're able to create, because we can't envision something outside of that. Well, school has to be like this. It's always been this way, right? Does it? Yeah. Is it always going to be that way? Right. And I have a lot of hope right now. It's a future slide about it, but I'm going to jump into it here. Has anybody listened to the telepathy tapes? I see a nod. I see a hand. Yes. Okay. We got a bunch of yeses. Great. Oh my goodness. The fact that this is one of the most downloaded podcasts makes me so excited about the future, because if we can imagine a world, right, for anyone who hasn't listened to it, it is a study, a collection of studies, a like beautiful storytelling summary of information we've known for decades, which is that nonverbal autistic people, study after study after study after study, has shown that they can communicate telepathically with each other and with others, right? And these are not in one or two little studies. These are thousands of people, right? And imagine a world where nonverbal autistic people, who we once and in some places still are pushing away, are on a stage with a telepathic translator telling the world about consciousness. Like, that could be here like so soon. That world is so different than when we were where we were last week. Oh my gosh, right? Like when that mental model changes of materialism, right? When Ty, the producer, narrator of the telepathy tapes, when she says, like, we know that phones have an energetic field outside the bounds of the physicality. We know that magnets have a field outside the bounds of physicality. When we as humanity recognize that our brains and our hearts unquestionably have a field outside the bounds of our physicality, where we can connect into a consciousness that is not attached to our body, we don't have to worry about climate change and more. Like, I mean, all that, once the mental model shifts, it's all going to shift, right? If we can all get there, right? I always, with my students, I talk about, oh, what's the thing you really care about, right? If everybody cared at the base of that pyramid, everybody cared about that thing as deeply as you do, you don't have to change policies, because every voter, every politician, every person in power, every company, they all would feel the same way. It's gone, it's done, it shifts. Now, changing mental models, not so easy, right? Super hard to do. But I mean, that's why this the fact that this podcast is being listened to so many people, it's like we are on the cusp of unlocking these huge mental model shifts that literally are attached to every issue that we are complaining about in this world, right? As we build this world, oh my gosh, what does that look like when we've shifted those, right? Okay. This is another tool. The real write-up of it that is on USAID's website, which doesn't exist anymore, so you actually can't find the description of it. But if you'd like, I can send it to you because I have it downloaded. But it's called the 5 hours model, and it's just another way, kind of a really basic summary of a system being resources go into a system, results come out of a system, and in the middle you have roles, rules, and relationships. And rules being actual policies, laws, etc., but also the mental models, which are way more conditioned than our rules, that dictate, this is how we operate as humanity, right? Or in our society or in our community, right? If it's like this can apply to a hospital, this could apply to your company, this could apply to your country, right? This could apply to a healthcare system, anything like that. And so these tools are just ways for us to get out of that linearity, right? That linearity of, you brought it up before. It's like my mom had hip surgery, and so she's supposed to take this medicine, but that medicine they know is going to cause constipation. So then there's this medicine that might deal with that, but there's another medicine because she might cause sleeplessness. And so there's that too, right? And it's like, whew, right? There's like this linearity to it. And it doesn't mean we can't try these things. But what happens, like I said, when we're like, more pesticide, more pesticide, more pesticide, those are mental models, right? That's a mental model that is saying the problem is that we just need more pesticide, right? Rather than what else is going on here, right? Can I send you across the street from the hospital so that we can listen more widely? Because our mental model clearly is not providing the answers to this fix that you need, right? And so you can use this kind of a tool to start to map that out. And you always start with results, because there must be a result of the system, at least one that you don't like, or you wouldn't be mapping this, right? You wouldn't care about it if it wasn't something you thought could be improved. But there's also must be results that are working for somebody, because the systems stay in place because they're working for somebody, for something, right? They're working to keep us out of our trauma, right? Sometimes it's like, we can't fix that because everyone would have to acknowledge something, right? Sometimes they're working certain people, certain companies, certain things are making a lot of money with this problem, staying a problem, right? And you start to ask those questions, who benefits from the system staying how it is, right? What would it look like to reimagine that result? In order to reimagine that result, what are possible leverage points? What are possible areas that if these things shift in some sort of combination, that result might improve? Now, in complexity, there's no linearity. We can't guarantee. We do not know. There's never one answer, right? The point of mapping, is never to find the right answer, because in complexity there isn't, right? And I'm jumping ahead again, but that's what I do, is that, when this thing is broken, when my phone is broken, I can go to the Genius Bar, I can go to my neighbor who's really good with phones, I can go somewhere and say, help, I can't text anybody, I'm lost without my maps, right? And we can all agree when it's fixed, right? Because we all have a shared sense of what it looks like to be fixed, right? When I lost it, I can ask, help me, I have a problem, I need the solution is to find it, right? It's an agreed upon solution. We know when I found it, we know we found it, right? The things that we're talking about, mental health, political challenges, recidivism, any of our environmental challenges, all of this, these are not problems. They're not problems. They are the results of complex systems. They are symptoms, and you cannot solve a symptom, right? You cannot solve a symptom. When you say it, you're like, of course you can't solve a symptom, Daniela. Who would try and solve a symptom? All of us, every day, right? when we try to solve complexity, you can't solve complexity. Why? Because there is no agreed upon solution. What is this? What is the agreed upon, finding my phone solution to poverty? Is it that everyone has the same amount of money? Is it that we all have a certain amount of money above a certain threshold? Who gets to decide that threshold? How do we know when we're there? Right? There's not an agreed upon state of solved. And it is so interconnected to everything else. There is never going to be a place where anything is in stasis enough that it's, oh, we're there right now. We're not there. We're there. We're not, right? That's not how complexity works, right? So we can shift the systems, right? If you look at this 5 R's model, we can pull different leverage points and try and contribute, and we can see, what shifted. Even if we take a nap, it's going to shift, right? You fell asleep in 2018, you woke up today. Oh my gosh, the world's so different. Why are all these people talking on this Zoomy thing, right? So you didn't do anything, you took a nap, right? So when there's issues that you care about, you have to actually be tuned into that system, whether or not it's not like you can take credit for these changes. You still have to be tracking and looking like and then you have a theory, and I call that a theory of systems change. And you've probably heard about a theory of change. So a lot of organizations have a theory of change, which is these are the activities we plan to do, and these are the outcomes, and these are the impact we hope to have. A theory of systems change is this is our theory of what might be possible to shift those results. And then we design our individual theory of change to lock into that, to say, we're going to try and shift this piece, contribute to shifting, right? So it's another important word, contribute. When I work with students, I often have them do like this little activity where I say, what are you solving? Go talk to your partner and have what are you solving in the world, right? And then I have them go talk to someone else and I say, how are you a contribution? How are you a contribution, right? And then I have them reflect, how was it for you, right? And the students are like, oh my gosh, when I get to be a contribution, there's so much weight lifted off my shoulders, right? Because I don't have to take it all on, right? And once again, when we're talking about systems, complexity, these are not problems. They can't be solved, right? So when we ask someone to solve something and it's impossible to solve, oh my gosh, if they have any form of, sanity, they're going to become insane because they're like trying to solve something that's impossible, right? They're like stuck in this, oh my God, my teachers told me I need to solve it. I can't solve it. It's so complex, right? So we're like giving them this impossible task, but instead we say to our students, go be a contribution. Oh my gosh, right? And it requires 2 things. It requires humbleness. I can't do it on my own, right? So great. Now I have to like get into a different mindset. And number 2, I have to have some sort of systems lens, because now I can look here, oh, who else is trying to do something? What are they trying to do? So that my contribution can unlock their potential, right? And it's just like a shift in how we're thinking about these challenges so that we can identify, am I talking about complexity? Okay, therefore, if it's finding my phone, we can solve it. Let's make a linear path. Let's try and use our MBA skills to, be more efficient and move faster, because we teach management in that way, or as if it's just like set the goal and keep incrementally moving as quickly as we can towards it, right? When we're in complexity, humbleness and a systems lens, and understanding that no matter how much pesticide I put on it, might not solve it, right? It's like my one hammer might not be, it might be if I'm lucky, maybe it's a thing, but if it's not, I'm gonna have to make some shifts, right? Okay, so back to Daniela Meadows. This is an article called Leverage Points, Places to Intervene in a System. And I've read it a whole bunch of times. And the first probably like 10 times I've read it, I was like, oh, my brain hurts. I don't really know what she's talking about. And she uses these words and it's too much, right? And so I don't know if it's just like I read it under good conditions last time, or I've just read it enough times. But finally, I'm like, oh, I'm starting to get it, right? So number 2, she talks about the paradigm, right? It's that mental model. Those, like, we get that. Okay, if we all shifted our mental model around telepathy from listening to the telepathy tapes and completely shifted our mental model on our ability to access consciousness in a collective way, oh my gosh, what changes, right? she talks about number one, and this is like when I finally like think I get it. I don't know, Daniela, you tell me if I did. Now that I'm sort of getting number one, I'm like, oh, this is what these times are calling for us. Like this is what this is, the power to transcend paradigms. And when I used to read that, I was like, what does she mean? I have to teach this in my class and pretend that I know what she's talking about. And I would make something up. But now I'm like, oh, it's if we can make that shift to real, like if as humanity, as individuals and collectively, we can get to the point where we're like, oh, this telepathy stuff is real. That, like, whoa, if I can do that, what else can I shift? Right? What the power to know that it is a paradigm, right? Because it's the whole thing of the water that we're in, and we can don't even know it's water, right? Can't read the label from inside the bottle, all that stuff, right? But once you get out and you're like, oh my gosh, I've been in this bottle. Nobody told me there were other bottles, right? Like, then you recognize, like, I want to jump into this bottle now, and later I might jump into that bottle, and oh, this bottle is not working for me, right? That's the power to recognize, like, we are in a mental model. And then forget it. Humanity's rocket. We got this once we can do that, right? Because then it also gives us a lot of responsibility. Our couples therapist she has the belief that if everyone meditated for 30 minutes a day, half of her work would be gone, right? But she would say, it is your responsibility, right? I don't know how to take my little hand down, but you're just gonna have to do it with my hand. Your responsibility, right? Like your ability to respond once you know that it is a choice, right? Once you know that it is a choice. Normally it would tell me to remove my hand, but it's not letting me remove my hand. So you are gonna have my hand, lower hand, there we go, okay. I'm too Italian. I always like, I'm talking with my hands and the little hand thing. Okay, so we looked at this already, but this is just like, this is Berkana two loops, right? So we talked about this, like there's the old system, new system coming, right? New system being born, pioneers, people pulling in different directions. And eventually at that, there's many versions of this. But the one from Chris Corrigan, who does the art of hosting, he talks at that very bottom of the loop of the second system, the emerging system. It's a naming process. It's like a name comes, right? So it's like when you have the name regenerative agriculture, oh, regenerative, I do regenerative, you do regenerative. Oh, wow, we both do regenerative. Let's have a conference, let's have principles, let's have a certification program. Like I can find you, you can find me, we can read each other's blogs, right? Because we have a name, right? When we have like conscious leadership, oh, we've got a name, we can have a conference, we can have a thing. Transpersonal psychology, we have a name, right? It's all made up. We made up these names, right? But once we have a name for something, we can find each other, right? And actually we can build that system because we can actually build the relationships and the interconnections and the power dynamics because we can find each other, right? And so one of the things that's going to get us into this next piece, actually, let's pause for a second. Questions on any of these tools that we just quickly looked through? I am running a course coming up where we look at 4 different tools and we learn about it and then we apply it to our lives. We're starting with the Berkana 2 loop, so I can share that link later. But any questions for right now on tools or anything? Yes, Terry.
Yeah, it's just one thing that was in my mind really around, I suppose what we're all trying to do is to help society shift our mental models in many ways to create this change. But it struck me, especially with the telepathy tapes, that to shift those mental models requires a bit of unlearning in the first place, to unlearn what we already know as such. I wonder if you could speak to that a little bit in terms of, is there anything in the work with systems that helps people unlearn in some ways?
Yeah, thank you. So part of it is unlearning, and I think even deeper than that is this Daniela Meadows piece of like holding our mental models lightly. You know, it's like once you've done it once or twice, when you have really shifted perspective about something so major in your life, then you realize like you're like, uh-oh, you know, what else do I need to reconsider, right? But that like holding on to, it's like, you know, we make up these stories. People are like, oh, those parents are making up this stuff about the telepathy tape. Really? Thousands of people are making this stuff up so that they can lose their licenses, so they can get made fun of by you, right? Or if we just look at that video with this angle, we can totally, you know, we make up these stories, right? Because we want to believe that thing, right? So there is, I think part of the work you're doing, work that I care about too, it's like learning to trust our intuition, learning to trust ourselves, learning to question authority, learning to have complex conversations. I have some slides on this I think I removed, but we can get to it. But basically, I can just summarize it, is that I believe that one of the biggest disservices we have to humanity right now is that in systems we talk about causal loops, right? So loops that like one thing causes another, that causes another, and then it recauses that same thing, and then you just have a, you know, a dynamic of exponential up or down, right? We have leaders, political, corporate, media, that has a belief that we can't handle complexity. So they tell us these linear narratives. Do this thing is safe, you know, that, you know, and we're just getting the narrative, not the complexity. Well, it's sort of safe. I mean, it's mostly safe, but like there's some studies that show this, but we need you to do this thing. So we're just going to tell you a narrative that is linear, right? And then we're going to not, as humanity, not be able to deal with complexity because someone else brings in a little complexity and we're like, you must be crazy, right? Like we can't, I can't, it's yes or it's no, it's black or it's white, right? And then those same powers that be are like, whoa, these people can't handle the truth from whatever movie that is, right? These people can't handle the truth. So I got to tell them a linear story again, right? So in order to break that cycle, we need to teach complexity. We need to tell complex stories. I have my students read an article called it's called Complicating the Narrative. And I use the term complexifying the narrative, but it's a beautiful piece from, there's like, most of it I agree with, there's parts I still have questions about, but it's a piece calling to journalists to say, hey, journalists, we are doing the world a disservice when we're feeding this clickbait and just feeding people one part of a story. You know, we look at a war, we look at a policy change. It's always yes and. It's like these, you know, and these people are saying you're wrong, and these people are saying you're wrong. But it's never, it's a little bit of this and it's a little bit of that. And we really got to, you know, do the yes and. And her argument is, journalists, we got to do the yes and. Let's look a little bit of here. And let's honor, even if 90% of this, we feel like there's still, if there's a 10% that is motivating this piece of the conversation and we override it, we are squashing our ability to deal with complexity. And then we're squashing the nuance. And then we're squashing our ability to bridge divides, right? So anyway, those all, I didn't fully answer your question here around how do we get into that beginner's mindset, you know, but go ahead, Terry, sorry.
Yeah, no, I think you shared why we have got stuck in this, and I was thinking about my education in school, which was very much, you know, a simplified view of the world, and let's put me in that bottle, and then I can only see what's in that bottle, and it's almost as if thinking, well, we need to help certainly with children to adopt these different perspectives, go into different bottles and experience it, and then we're more flexible as adults, and then we can see the complex picture a lot more. Yeah.
And we can put ourselves in someone else's shoes and be like, oh, I might not agree with all those things, but I understand why those people are protesting this thing that I think is good, because there's this piece that we have overridden and haven't listened to, right? oh wow, now let's have a conversation, like about that thing, because I can see it now because I'm willing to engage in complexity. And we have been, obviously the algorithms, social media, it's destroying our ability to see, because we actually do not hear it. We do not see it. We're only being fed one narrative. Oh, you want this narrative? You're going to click on it more. I'll make more money. I'm going to feed it to you. I'm going to feed it to you. I'm going to feed it to you. Right. So even more so, that ability to help people see that there are, Tuesday Rivera talks about how, like, in important things, there's big T truths, and they're competing, and they can both be true, right? She used an example of, like, diversity. There's one view that, like, we are different. If you can't see that I have a different life experience than you because of my, skin color, experience, because of how people view me, whatever, then you don't get me. And there's another view that's like, oh, we're all the same. We have, like, almost all the same genes. We have a lot of the same desires, right? And actually, both are true, right? Both are true. And how can we have conversation? Because sometimes we're fighting as if these two things need to be resolved. One of them is right and one of them is wrong, right? Like, no, they're actually both true, right? And so we're all the same and we are all different, right? And so those are, like, these nuance and complexity. This is what we need to teach our kids, right? They're not going to need to learn anything else. They can look it up in these things. They're going to, they don't need to memorize the date of the invasion of the whatever. They just ask, right? But they do need to learn that history is created by whoever tells the story, that there's probably another perspective on that, of how to even get that. When you're being fed one narrative, how do I even get another narrative? How do I listen beyond what the algorithms are feeding me, right? And my willingness to do so, right? That's the hard part right now with cancel culture, my willingness to do so, right? Because I can't even admit to someone I listened to this other thing, right? Some of my students, like, I can't even have the conversation because I might be deemed, supportive of a different view. Dangerous, right? We need to work on that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other questions that are pressing right now before we move on to some other things? We'll just keep going, but you're welcome to ask anything or speak up anytime. So we're going to go back. We're going to keep going into this. We call systems. Okay. So as we look at this, I was on a panel. So I remembered this story so clearly, and it's like I carried it with me. And I was on this panel with a woman named Karen Joseph, who's the CEO of, Reconciliation Canada. And I looked it up recently because I was like, what? I was trying to get her email to, like, connect with her, but I was trying to see, where were we speaking at? And I looked it up, and it was actually called Beyond Incrementalism, was this panel that we were on. I was like, oh, it's perfect. Who knew? But she talks about how in her lineage, there's two types of time. There's linear time, which has, it calls for masculine leadership, and circular time, which calls for feminine leadership. Obviously, it's not about gender. This is about, we can all embody, if you look at the work of the divine feminine, divine masculine, these are different, these are ways of being in the world, perspectives, and also, like, energetic embodiments that we can all embody. And her view, that as she's sharing from her lineage, was that when we have linear time, right, I said we need, oh, I'm going to fast forward a second. Oh, no, I'm not. Okay. With linear time, it says at the bottom there, we'll get there. We need linear leadership, right? It's called masculine leadership, linear leadership. And we just talked about this already, right? This idea that there's a problem and there's a solution and I can move forward to get there, right? And so I talked about my phone, right? So I already did that part. But the problems that we're talking about today, people that are on house living at the end of our road, issues with our planet and how we deal with our environment, all of these are complexity, right? And like I said, you can't solve the symptoms. These are symptoms. These are the results of complex challenges, right? So in circularity, you have systems, you can't have solutions, can't solve a symptom, but you can shift and we can contribute to shifting, right? So we've had this conversation. So we need this circular leadership. And actually I was on a call this morning with Nick, my friend Nick, and I don't know if, I think give me permission to share this, so I won't give his last name, but he was talking about how he worked in Indigenous communities in Northern Canada. And at one point he's like, we were running this program. And he's like, we were like, it was an education program. And he's like, every month we're like, tweak it, make it better, make it better, make it better. And he was talking to one of the community leaders there. And he's like, we are running like the most scientifically perfect program. Like, why is this not working as quickly and as well as much? And she goes, white man, you are thinking in linearity and you got to start thinking in circularity, right? And so, because I was talking about this and I was just like, I love that story. And she's like, he's like, it changed my life, right? And he's like, I was just looking at this program of how to like scientifically, what are the results say that if you do this and you do that and you do that, we can get there. And but I wasn't looking at like, what does the community think about education? How does this integrate into the systems that are already there? How does this work feed into or impacted by, you know, all of that, right? That go across the street from the hospital story, right? That leadership, right? When Tuesday Rivera talks about relationship as resolution, right? It's like, I'm not trying to win here, right? We can go into that now. Linear leadership, we are right, you're wrong, right? I keep hearing people say we need to fight harder, right? We need to fight harder. That is a Cold War strategy, right? We need to fight harder is just an escalation. Do we really need to fight harder? That's like what mental model is making us believe, well, the reason we didn't win is we didn't fight hard enough. Well, if we fight harder next time, right? Like, where are we going to get to if we keep these things? That's a view that there's winners and there's losers, right? I need to dominate in this conversation because if I get more, in order for me to get what I want, you need to get less, right? I need to find the right metric of success. It's that story from Nick, right? I got to find the right strategy. If we just, there's got to be scientific data on how to get this thing better, right? But if we're taking linear action, no matter how much pesticides we're putting on, right? Then we are stuck. We're never going to get past this little contribution we're trying to make, right? So circular leadership, right? This like spaciousness, intuition, trusting ourselves, right? Our relationships, looking at those interconnections, right? It's not just my little education program and the things I can control. I got to get it right. It's how is it woven into the fabric of this community, right? And if I'm not looking there, I am overlooking the possibility of this ever really, really being successful. That spaciousness, that trust. And the trust is trusting ourselves, trusting our interests, and you know, and the trust that we're going to build together, because if my job is to contribute and I can't do it alone, we have to stay in trust because I'm contributing and you're going to contribute and someone else is going to contribute, right? That's the only way forward. It's a totally different way in the world, right? If we look at all the things going on in the world right now and you're just like, oh my gosh, if someone who is connected to their trust, their belief in the power of relationship as a resolution, if someone was sitting in that room who could connect to that interconnection between all of us, hopefully we'd be having a really different conversation, right? And I just, sometimes when I see some of this, I'm like, this is the last hurrah of a linear cycle, right? That is ready to die, right? And I call it systems understanding, but like I said, there's like consciousness is woven in there, which I know a lot of you care about. There's a lot of, you know, reconnecting to our Indigenous ways of knowing how to be with each other is in there. Our relationship to nature and regenerative that's in there, right? All of this is woven in there. Right? And it's not about the pendulum swung. The pendulum swung really far into linearity, right? Like we've tested this out and we have hit, hopefully, our max linear capacity, right? and we are swinging, and it's not like we can just sit in spaciousness all the time, right? We still need to hire the person and pay the bill and, make the website and do this, like all those things that are literally problems to be solved. We need to find the phone when it's lost, right? But we also need the capacity to recognize this is a systems problem, not a linear problem, and I'm going to change hats and go into my like complexity understanding self and pause. And it's like, fix it now. Oh, no. Where are we at? What's it connected to? My program isn't working. Where's the relationships in this community? Like, what else might be contributing to this? Like, what is this connected to? Where's the power dynamics? All those tools that we just looked at, right? And we can get into balance individually and collectively with that linearity and circularity within ourselves, right? So what would it be like? What would it be like back in balance? Okay, so that little meditation we did, right? It's like, it's time. And one of the questions that I came to Terry with when we had our call was, what does it look like? Okay, we talked about this renaming process, right? Oh, regenerative, we can hang out. Oh, you're doing regenerative, I'm doing regenerative. Oh, you're doing conscious leadership, I'm doing conscious leadership, right? There isn't necessarily a hoop right now that all of these people see themselves in. I see them in a hoop that is called, do I still have it here? Reconnecting with each other and the planet, right? Like reconnecting to ancestral ways of knowing ourselves, each other, and the planet, right? And in some ways, and this isn't perfect, this is just like a quick thing. Thank you, Jessica, I love the hearts. Right, this is like, what would it look like to name that hoop? To have all these people, Terry, I love how you started with, hi neighbor, right? I'm not remembering Daryl's last name, but Daryl is a Blackfoot teacher that I had the chance to learn with a bit in Banff when I was part of the Positive Deviance program. And Daryl taught me, I mean, this is inspired from Daryl because I had he taught a story that said, like in my community, the way that my lineage has grown up is that you had a teepee and that was your like little family, but you were in a circle of other teepees. And that was your like wider family, but you'd walk to the next circle. And as you entered that circle of teepees, someone said, hello, brother. Hello, son, right? Because there was a view that there's a wider hoop connecting us all, right? Whether that's like our consciousness, our connection to each other on the earth and everything, right? Or a view that we are in the same work, right? So what would that hoop be? That instead of rolling their eyes at each other, the divine feminine people and the consciousness people and the generative people and the spiritual people and the planet people, whatever, we're all like, hey, we're in the same hoop, right? This hoop. And it's called, I don't know, right? People call it the new earth. Oh, that's too hippie woo-woo, right? Other people are like, oh, consciousness future. Well, I don't know, this is about consciousness, right? Rematuration. These are all amazing names. But I'm interested, and it's a call to all of you. I have a vision for like one contribution to this hoop creation that is some sort of gathering of 20, 100, I don't know, people in every one of them. These aren't all of them, but in these groups who are saying like, we find each other because of regenerative. We find each other because of consciousness. We find each other because of the divine feminine, because of rematuration, whatever, different spiritual groups. We're all working towards this same thing, this reweaving of our old way in a modern world of reconnecting to ourselves, each other, and the planet. What if we all came together, put a little bit of money in, or found a funder, if you have one, who just has a spare 100 to 150 grand and wants to throw it into this, right? To say, we're going to actually do a call out to humanity to say, what are you doing that is bringing in this shift? What are you calling it? What are you doing, right? Map it and actually share it back to each other so that the consciousness people can see that the other, the rematuration people, where are our linkages? What are you doing? Wow, what are you believing? What are you seeing? What is that hoop? And then we can start to have our own little conferences of this wider hoop. Wow. And we can start to have our own, like we can build that system even more because these are all parts of it, right? This is what is being called. Right? So that's a conversation I'd love to open into here. Let me just see what we've got here. Yeah, so I've got a story to end us, but let's open this conversation. Like, what do you think about all that we've talked about so far? And what would it be like to make that circle bigger? How can we make the circle bigger? What's coming up for you? Go for it. No pressure. I can tell the last story and then we can chat more if you want. But if anyone has, Sophie.
I think, look, I was going to say you've got things in the chat.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Jessica, why don't you speak and then I'm going to catch myself up on the chat too.
Sure thing. And thank you very much. I'm so with you. And I'm feeling into this hoop or this, overarching Indra's net or whatever metaphor you want to evoke. But I do wonder, do we need to converge on one web, one interconnected web of life, or is it something where we merge it's kind of cosmolocalism, merging the kind of cosmological vision of everything being interconnected, interbeing, underpinning everything, and then at the same time honoring that we need perhaps different languages in different places and spaces, that we don't need to all converge on the same way of seeing things, or that it's actually okay to have this diversity, which is underpinned by unity. So I feel like there's something that is kind of constellating itself that wants to honor both the unity, the unitive underpinning of what you're speaking of there, and the multiple expressions that are manifesting in response to the hugely varied contexts that we have on this planet, right? All these different ecosystems that are giving birth to different life forms and different ways of being and thinking and doing. So that's a piece for me. And yeah, maybe we can sometimes try too hard to unify and then squeeze something out, kind of leading to a new conformity, which is actually counterproductive. So that's something I'm sitting with, and I'm curious what you make of that.
100%. So I think this is a big T truth situation, right? That these things are separate. These movements are separate. And it's not, okay, so I used to, with my students, I would do work, or, if I'm working with, I've worked with like entrepreneurial teams within companies or different accelerator programs, and I would have them reveal their whys, right? So for example, I had a student group that cared about green spaces in LA. One of them cared about it because he cared about mental health issues, and he knew that the research showed that access to more green spaces is going to lead to better health. Another cared about it for racial justice reasons, right? Because access to green spaces is not equal based on racial lines, and he wanted to make more equality there. And a third was like, I got kids and I want them to have a place to play, right? So in my old model, I used to think, y'all need to figure out this, like, that it's the convergence piece. I was like, you need to figure out your collective why, because it's going to be a barrier, right? And what's your why here that you're agreeing on? Because like, if in the future you're like, oh, let's do more racial justice work, and someone's like, we're not doing racial justice work, we're doing mental health work, right? Then I came across Tuesday Rivera's work, and she talks about the shared work model. And I love this, right? So if we go back here, we are not talking about these group all have, like, they're not going to have the same worldview. They're not going to have the same priorities. They're not going to have the same vision. No, right? But there is shared work, right? And if that shared work is, in my view, waking humanity up to any of these pathways in to this, we could go back to that slide of Daniela Meadows that, hey, you're in a paradigm. You're in a paradigm. You're in the bottle. You get to choose to be in that bottle. I mean, you're doing that in transpersonal psychology. Those of you who are here for that, right? That's what you're doing. You're helping them do that, probably often on an individual basis. And this is like taking that also to this like view of like, what is a school, right? Like, right, these are it's a choice, because once you recognize it's a choice, it therefore, like I was saying, our couples therapists talk about responsibility. Your ability to respond is now yours, because it's now a choice. Whereas in the past, it wasn't. It was just like, I didn't have a choice. This is my only mental model, right? And so just bringing that in, Jessica, like, I do not think there's going to be a homogeneity, right? I was just on a group, and they're doing conscious education, and it's awesome, and it's so interesting. And she's like, we need to figure out the principles that align it. I don't think we need to. We need to figure out what our shared work is, and then contribute to that shared work, right? Because I believe there is shared work here. And what is that, right? Compassion. Did anyone oh yeah, Henry, you wrote it. Bring us more into what you wrote in the chat, or anywhere else you want to take us.
Yeah, no, I was just thinking. I think probably following on from what Jessica was saying, because I'm reading. I'm listening to Paul Hawkden's "Blessed Unrest" at the moment, and that was written in 2008, I think. So it's relatively old now. And he was, I mean, I'm only halfway through, but he was writing about exactly the same thing, really, that there's the greatest movement in history that's happening, and it's completely decentralized, but it's all kind of connected in a way which is unnamed and not organized centrally. So I guess I was just kind of sat with the question of whether it is necessary to name it. Like, is that in the Bacana? I can't remember what you described it as, but in Bacana, is that seen as like a really critical stage?
Okay, so I mean, all of these have been named, right? So like the conscious leadership, right? All of these are naming processes. In the business world, there's it's called claim, demarcate, control, and it's Carlos Santos et al. I don't remember who the et al's are, but Carlos Santos and some others. And their view in business world is like, when you're entering a new space, right? So you have Blockbuster Video, or you had to walk in and rent a CD or rent a video, right? And then you have streaming, right? Claiming, demarcating, controlling is like, you're like naming, this is streaming, this is what it is, this is what it's not, right? And of course, like in a business world, you're trying to control it and monopolize and win. In this model, yeah, there is a naming process, but it's not about control, right? Like, I don't think we need an organization. There's no way you can control what is happening here. Don't think we need an organization. I don't think we need a unifying field of force. I don't think we need a but there is a view that it's the neighbor thing. Like, Terry, it was such a perfect opening. Like, hi, neighbor, right? There's a view that if we can see ourselves in each other, like if we can find each other in this work, like the more we can find each other, this naming process is essentially a weaving process to have people, like, it's not that we're going to work together and hang out. There's going to be some coordinating thing, right? That like moves us from gasoline cars to electric cars. There's different contributions that happen along the way, right? But there is some solidification, not from an outside force, so, but I think there is something to like the contribution I'm thinking about is just, how do you reflect back to each other the shared work of that, and maybe that like the focus on naming is wrong here. It's not necessarily the piece, but I think the naming comes about when there's a solidification of form. Like, we ended up with this whole move towards electric cars. Like, it could have been like water powered or solar powered or whatever. It's not because someone named it. It's because like all of the different like pieces started to solidify around that, right? And now it's like, okay, now we're building infrastructure towards that. And eventually we'll get to a point where we want to run our cars off of air, and we'll have to redo all that infrastructure when we get there. So sometimes it's a technical piece, right? Yeah, you've been reading Saving Humanity, and Tibetan Master She Channels describes the same thing. What did she describe, Tim? Tell us. And you don't have to unmute if you can't for any reason. Maybe Tim is just in listening. Okay, I'm realizing we don't have a lot of time left.
Okay,
Okay, go ahead, Tim. Yeah.
yeah, no, sorry. No, she describes a new group of world servers who are, people who are working to bring about transformation in the consciousness of humanity, but working without structure, without organisation, as you just described. So, people from all kind of different religions and backgrounds and scientists and that kind of stuff, but all working towards this common aim, but without that defined organisation. So pretty much exactly as you've just been describing, both you and Henry.
Thank you, Tim. Yeah, feel free to share any links or anything in the chat too. Okay, I want to tell us this last story. If we have anyone read about the interstitium already? People know about the interstitium. No. Okay, so okay, the interstitium is literally a new body part. Obviously not new, it's been there for a while, but new to Western medicine. And it was found in 2015 and presented to the world in 2018. But Neil Thies, a professor of pathology at NYU, was he looks at slides of cut up organs, right? Because as we dissect, take things apart, we cut up these organs, and he's looking, and the edge of the slide is always a little fuzzy. And he was taught, and he teaches, that the edge of that slide is fuzzy because we use formaldehyde and other drying agents, and we dry the organ, and then it kind of cracks at the edges. Well, he was looking through this new microscope, and he's looking at the live organ. He's looking at a gallbladder inside a body, and he notices these like tubes, these interwoven tubes on the edge of the gallbladder. And then he starts asking questions and researching, and people are like, you're crazy, there can't be something there, we would have seen it, would have found it, all of the things that happen when we try and challenge the status quo. And he's kind of obsessed with this. I'm going to keep going, right? And so he keeps going. And eventually, fast forward, we don't have a lot of time to the story, realizes that not only is this on the edge of the gallbladder, it is on every single organ in our body. It is under our skin. It is lining all of our vessels. It holds more liquid than the volume of our blood. It holds more liquid than the volume of our blood. We always knew that we had interstitial fluid, right? So we knew the liquid was there, but we didn't know that it was a system. It actually might be an organ. An organ has to be like named by a lot of people, an organ, but essentially it is a system in the body that brings material and communication between every organ of our body without going through the bloodstream, right? Think about how many times it's like, test your blood to know about your health. If we deal with the blood, we can fix our, this is like our lymph. This is our entire immune system's communication system potentially that is separate from the blood. It changes how we think about cancer research. It changes how we think about treating illnesses, right? It's huge, right? And the story could have been, oh, really good new microscope saves the world again, right? Turns out you can freeze the organ and you can peel the interstitium right off. It is visible to the naked eye. And we have missed it because of so many things, right? But when they stood up in 2018 to present this paper, the first person to raise their hand in the audience was a Chinese medicine doctor who said, we have known about this for 4,000 years, right? And this is why I think we missed it. Okay, we focus on parts and not the whole, right? So the mental model is don't ask academic things outside your area of expertise, focus on your part, right? In America, someone is an ultrasound tech for one body part, just the uterus, just the lungs, right? And we talked to someone who's saying in Sweden, you're an ultrasound tech for everything. You're going to see more when you're allowed to look beyond your little part, right? We overlooked indigenous ways of knowing. We're like, oh, we think acupuncture works, but we don't know why. Western science is correct because we have materiality. We have to prove it. We have science. We can see it, right? And we pretend that indigenous knowledge is primitive. They've known about this for 4,000 years. It's a core principle of Chinese medicine education, right? We confuse science as fact. This is so huge right now. Science is hypothesis. Science is about challenging and saying, I have this hypothesis. Let's test it out. Let's be willing to change, right? But we have this mental model that says challenge science is challenging the truth. No, challenging science is science. That's how we do good science, right? And do we devalue a beginner's mindset? That question that was asked earlier. We say trust the experts rather than like viewing like actually your new way of looking at something might bring us somewhere. And we overlook the value of presence and we don't teach tools to practice it, although I know you all do, right? Because he says, Neil Thies says that his Buddhist lineage, his meditation practice was probably part of why he could do this, because he's trained to be more present to what's there and was willing to be like, I'm going to keep looking here because I'm not going to listen to all these people who say, you must be crazy. We couldn't have seen that. We must have seen it. Right. And then this is huge right now, really huge, getting stuck in groupthink. Everyone believes it, so it must be true. Right. That is the main thing that we're really stuck in. So to me, this is systems thinking, is to get through this, right? And the other interstitiums out there, we jumped ahead and we talked about telepathy tapes and these other things that we are like, people are like, hey, that little fuzzy stuff on the edge, right? If you listen to the Radiolab story about the interstitium, he is like crying almost because he's like, what else have I been teaching so wrong? Like, how did I miss this? How did we miss this, right? So what else are we missing, right? If we had more time, we could think about that. But this is an example. People are like, oh, it can't be true. It's true, right? Like, so if it's like, we have to be willing to listen to these other things, right? And I remember I walked into my mom's house. My mom has a TV always on. I'm one of these people. I'm like, a TV's on. I can't listen to anything else. I don't have a TV in my house, but it was this ghost in your genes, right? And it was saying, actually, our genes aren't just our genes, it's epigenetics. And actually, if you smoke, if you go through a famine and if these things, you actually change your genes. You change which genes are pronounced, right? So you change the epigenetics for many generations, right? So I had a smoking father. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's no longer just me. I'm doing it about me. Same thing with our energy and our consciousness. It's no longer. It's like, actually, my energy and what I bring into the room impacts you. So it's like we have different responsibility here, right? And when we start to realize this, I only have 1 minute left, so I'm going to tell you how you can stay connected. You can email me. I would love that. Feel free. You can visit my website, systemsledleadership.com, or you can put your email in here and I can keep you up to date. I co-authored 2 books this year that are coming out. Love to share those with you. Please reach out. You can, if you're an educator, we have a social impact educator group. And then I just want to share 2 for educators. I have a peer-to-peer office hours coming up. It's not anyone working in the impact space. You don't have to be an educator. And this course that I mentioned before, 4 weeks of look at these different tools and examine them in their lives. And the first one's going to be Berkana. And then Sophie and I are running a one-off workshop and then a multi-month program around rethinking leadership for our times, the divine feminine and systems-led leadership. And we come at this with, so we come at this from these 2 different lenses that we're going to weave together, and we hope you'll join us. So feel free to send us a note, drop anything in the chat, and I'm also willing to stay on longer if anyone has any pressing questions right now. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, Daniela. That was fantastic. Really was. Yeah, so rich, so much depth there. And me personally, I'm looking to find out more. And I'll tell you one of the reasons why is that I was in a meeting today and we started off with, I think, what you would call circular leadership, but then we tried to solve the symptoms and we tried to do it through linear leadership in many ways. And it didn't work. And I can see why now. I can see why it's a complex system we were engaging with. And I think we just got upset with each other as well because it wasn't working, you know. So it really resonates with me, and I feel that I need to learn more about this so that it's the front of my mind when we're engaging with complex systems. Yeah, and thank you for offering to stay for a few minutes more before we close it. So, open the floor. Then, has anybody got a quick question to ask? Anything burning? No, all good. All good. Okay, well, thank you, Daniela, and thank you for sharing all those contact details as well. Perhaps we'll try and grab them out of the recording and send them off to people so that everybody can contact you and take it further. Perhaps ask some questions as well. So thank you, Daniela. Daniela,
Thank
well done.
you.
Thank you. Brilliant,
Thanks
brilliant.
for having me. Thank
Okay, thank you everyone else for joining us. And before we close, just talk about the next webinar, which is on the 6th of May, and that is with Dagmar Souza, and she's going to be talking about breaking the toxic cycle, really recognizing that many of our workplace cultures have become toxic, and we're all in that, we're all part of that, and we've created that. It's almost as if, you know, that metaphor of the frog in the water, and the water's getting hot and we don't get out. And I think that is the case of our cultures in organisations, but also we're the ones turning up the heat as well, I think, just to add to that. So she's going to help us to recognise the toxic cultures within our organisations and then what we can do to try and transform our organisations to create better cultures. So that's on the 6th of May, and it's at a slightly earlier time. It's at 6:30 p.m, 6:30 till 8. So hope to see you there. Okay, well, thank you, neighbours. It's been lovely to spend some time with you this evening. Thank you very much, and look forward to seeing you in May, the 6th of May. Thank you, and thank you, Daniela. Thank you.
Thank you, neighbors.
Thank
Nice
you.
to meet you.
Bye.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Terry.
Bye.
Thanks,
Good night.
Daniela.
Good
Thanks,
night.
Terry. Thank you,
Bye
Daniela.
bye.
Thank
Take
you
care.
so much. Take care. Brilliant. That
Thank
was
you.
great, Daniela. That was super. Really enjoyed that. Thank you so much.
I appreciate you. Yeah, feel free to connect, and if there's anything we want to do together, I'd love that. So wonderful. Ciao.
Totally hearing you. And we'll share your workshop as well. We'll, we'll social media thing. We'll blitz it.
Thanks. Yeah,
Let's
send
get it
it to
out.
me in
Yeah.
a group. Thank you so much.
Fab.
Have a great day. Ciao.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you, Terry.
And breathe.
Pause the recording.
Yeah, shall I do that?
Yes, please.
Here we go. So it says you're stopping recording.